Welcome back. I'm Marcin Mikos and you're watching World News. European leaders gathered today in Paris say that lifting sanctions against Russia would be a serious mistake because Moscow is currently not interested in real peace in Ukraine. The summit called by Emmanuel Macron comes after President Volodymyr Zelenskyy agreed earlier this month to proceed with a ceasefire.
European leaders leave Thursday's so-called Coalition of the Willing summit in Paris. Some 30 countries working together to support Kyiv as US-brokered peace talks with Russia and Ukraine progress. They were united in the view that now is not the time to lift sanctions on Russia.
What we discussed is how we can increase sanctions to support the US initiative to bring Russia to the table through further pressure from this group of countries.
No lifting any kind of sanctions until Russia will stop this war. And I think more pressure on it, more packages of sanctions, this is what.
Zelensky's team agreed earlier this month to progress with ceasefire talks to ensure a resumption of US aid and intelligence sharing. However, Russia has begun placing extra demands on the implementation of a ceasefire deal in the Black Sea and on energy targets. Germany's outgoing Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, said it would be a mistake to end sanctions now.
The sanctions must be continued. They'll also have to be developed further. And Europe and the US must take a clear stand together so that we can continue to use this opportunity to support Ukraine. It makes no sense to end the sanctions until peace has actually been achieved.
The meeting has also debated military and operational plans to support Ukraine. The discussions will now be fed back to the United States, so Washington understands Europe's position.
Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk says the war in Ukraine has changed Europe's view on Russia and the bloc is no longer naive about Moscow. Speaking after a meeting in Paris that discussed support for Ukraine, Tusk added that Europe has now begun to believe in its own strength.
All of the leaders appearing today were characterized, I would say, by such exceptionally visible common sense, pragmatism, but also determination. I think I can say without false modesty that the view that I have put forward, or made on behalf of probably all of us in Poland, is that Europe has changed, and that this is perhaps one of the most important consequences of this war, that Europe has just lost all illusions towards Russia. Europe stopped being naive. Europe began to believe in the need to build its own strength. Europe understood that the best guarantee of peace for Poland, for Europe, for Ukraine, of course, will be our strength, our determination, and such solidarity.
An overnight Russian drone attack on the Ukrainian city of Kharkiv left at least 21 people wounded, including 2 children. Firefighting crews worked through the night to contain multiple fires sparked across the city by the strike.
It was another difficult night for Kharkiv. This time no one died, but the destruction to people's homes speaks volumes. Hannah, who lives in one of the buildings targeted by Russia, was clearly emotional as she recounted the events of Wednesday night.
We sheltered at home and heard the impact, jumped out into the corridor and just kneeled down. It was very loud, but our windows, thank God, were intact because we opened them, but the explosion blew the door over us. We heard the glass shattering.
As world leaders repeat Russia's openness to peace, Hannah finds it hard to believe.
How can we believe Russians' commitment to a ceasefire? No one believes them. They never do what they promise. Why were they allowed to attack us in the first place? They just kill Ukrainians, that's what they do.
While homes such as Hannah's were heavily damaged, the biggest fire caused by Wednesday's attack was in an industrial building.
Tonight there was a Russian drone attack on warehouses and production facilities. Every building was civilian, no military equipment, no military. Not a single military person was here.
Kharkiv, just 30 kilometers from the front line, has been a constant target of Russian attacks. Yet despite the destruction, signs of Ukraine's fierce resistance are visible on every corner.
French President Emmanuel Macron slammed US President Donald Trump's threats to impose tariffs on cars, describing the proposal as a waste of time. The comments came after the European Commission today announced it will most likely respond to Trump's proposal by the end of next week. And so we are now going live to our EU correspondent, Angela Skujins in Brussels. Good afternoon, Angela. So what else did Macron say regarding the transatlantic trade?
Yes, so the French President Emmanuel Macron said today that he told the US President Donald Trump yesterday that imposing this fresh round of tariffs was not a good idea. To recap, the 47th President of the United States announced from the White House Oval Office in Washington late yesterday his intent to slap 25% import duties on all cars and trucks entering the US market. Now, Trump claims that this will revive the country's ailing manufacturing sector, but this news left the EU scrambling. We've heard some of the strongest comments coming out of Paris. So let's take a listen to what that French President Emmanuel Macron had to say.
I think it's not a good idea. I've said this to President Trump. I told him yesterday, and I'll keep telling him. At a moment when we can see well the markets in the United States do not consider this a good economic policy, at a moment when President Trump is rightly asking Europeans to make more defense efforts to ensure their own security, saying, it's up to you to do this, we should not have to pay for you. Well, it's not the time to impose tariffs on us. So it's not coherent.
Yes. So what we've heard from Westminster is that there is no intent just yet that the UK wants to slap reciprocal tariffs on the US. This is markedly different from the approach of Germany. We know that country's finance minister, Robert Habeck, has come to the defense of some of the country's most iconic car brands. We're talking about Volkswagen to BMW. He said the EU should not take this news lying down. But the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen was one of the quickest leaders to respond. She issued a statement late last night saying she was deeply regretful of this news and will take the next couple of days to assess her next moves. We understand here in the Belgian capital that a response will most likely come on Thursday or Friday next week. What we're hearing is that there is no clear understanding in what Trump is proposing thus far. So all of the officials have to wait and see what is in that package. We know that it'll come on April the 2nd, also known as what Donald Trump is labelling Liberation Day. But we'll be covering that for you from the Belgian capital. But that's all from me. I'll send it back to you in Warsaw.
Thank you so much, Angela. That was Angela Skujins reporting from Brussels. And that would be all for now. Thank you for watching. We'll have more news coming at the top of the hour.